I would like to begin by sharing with the US EPA a map documenting the spread of glyphosate, or Roundup, as it's commercially called, across America from 1992 to 2014. As you can see, the application has grown in exponential length and breadth over the course of 20 plus years. The result has been the metamorphosis of the weeds it was intended to kill to accommodate first-generation GMO plants, until these weeds, have acquired a genetic immunity we call superweeds, which now require the application of glyphosate, which is Roundup with 2,4-D, into what Monsanto labels as Duo, in a synergistic combination, reminiscent of the chemical strategy used in Agent Orange during Vietnam. True, it is not exactly the same, but the strategy and its lethal potent are the same. What defies all logic is the US EPA is so far behind the curve again in addressing the harmful effects of glyphosate at a time when the US EPA has already signed on to repeating the same mistake with Duo. You've doubled down. What is wrong with you? What are you doing to America? Why have you abandoned your congressional charter to protect America? This hearing is the one the US EPA should have conducted in 1992, 4 years before Roundup was allowed to begin its exponential application with first-generation GMOs in 1996, which has proven to be a failed experiment witnessed by your promotion of a second generation of GMOs and the new poison, the new Agent Orange, Duo. You want proof? Talk to Terry Ingram of Apple River, co-founder of the Eagle Conservatory in the 1960s to fight DDT, master beekeeper and publisher of the Small Beekeepers Journal, who began documenting Roundup's decimation of not only the bee population, but also butterflies starting in 1996, the same year farmers began broadcasting Roundup, unaware of its threat to the health, safety, and welfare of not only themselves and their families, but every American. Colony collapse disorder never showed up in your radar until 2006, because that's when the artificial demand the US EPA had created through your alternative 10% blend to allegedly clean the air forced GMO low manpower corn production into the upper plains where commercial beekeepers are located. Yet 10 years prior, in 2006, Roundup was already decimating the small beekeeper operations in the Midwest breadbasket. Where was the US EPA then? I can tell you they're nowhere to be found. And where is the US EPA today? Once again, even further behind the curve, because now you have embraced the future failure of the second generation GMOs and Duo, doubling down in the face of every expert in and outside of academia who have come to the same conclusion. The second generation GMOs will fail just like the first generation GMOs. And when it fails in 10 or 20 years, what is the US EPA's strategy? What will be the damage to America by then? This requires an answer from this board. But I think it can tell you what your answer is. You don't know, because you have no idea, because what you have been conducting against America for well over 20 years is a failed experiment. And all you intend to do is to extend that failed experiment for as long as you can, so that someone else can answer that question. Yet, I put it to you now. In this respect, your conduct is mirrored in the Federal Reserve Bank and their dead-end experiment with America's financial health. Only you, the US EPA, are attacking the health, welfare, and safety of every American as well as humanity. And just as the Fed are being forced down an ever-restrictive funnel of failure where they will have no alternative but to throw up their hands and surrender to the future, leaving financial destruction in their wake, you, the US EPA, is following the same track. The only difference is, whereas the Fed's crimes involve only money, the US EPA's abandonment of its fiduciary duty will lead to the decimation and death of America. How many on this hearing board have gone into the field in Illinois or Iowa, stuck a spade into the ground to see what biological life there is? My bet is not one of you. But let me share with you what you will find in a GMO field. You will find nothing. No life, not a worm. Unless, of course, it is a superbug that has become immune to the other poisons you permit. How many of you allow your children or grandchildren to eat Cheerios? How many of you did know that Enresco Labs performed tests on 29 foods commonly found in grocery store shelves for glyphosate residues? Here's just three. General Mills Cheerios, 1,125.3 parts per billion. Cashew soft baked oatmeal dark chocolate cookies at 275.57 parts per billion. Ritz crackers at 270.24 parts per billion. How many of you are aware that recent studies show Roundup can cause liver and kidney damage in rats at only 0.05 parts per billion, while additional studies have found that levels as low as 10 parts per billion can have toxic effects on the livers of fish who live in that water? I know some of you are aware of Dr. Stephanie Seneff of MIT. If you don't know who Dr. Seneff is, you should resign from your post. Dr. Seneff's research focuses on the connections between the environmental crimes of the US EPA, FDA, and the USDA permits and associates that rapid decrease in Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, and autism, all laid at your doorstep. Indirectly, but I lay it before you directly. Whereas autism in the 1970s was found in 1 in 10,000 children affected, autism has grown to 1 in 100 during the last decade. Until today, it affects 1 in every 65 children, of which 1 in 49 are young boys, as autism strikes boys far more than girls. Roundup was introduced in the 1970s, hitting stride in 1996. Its saturation growing with the rising tide in autism. Where is the US EPA been? What is your answer? Dr. Seneff now projects autism will accelerate to 1 in every 2 males born in these United States by 2025. That's less than 10 years away. Yet autism is the product of a pre-existing condition, but is fired by an environmental trigger. In America, where every 1 in 2 newborn boys will be condemned to autism, have you calculated the destruction? I can tell you what the costs are. It means the destruction of America. What is your answer? Where is the US EPA? I will tell you, you are 20 years behind the curve, and by your leisure conducting a known failed experiment on all the American people. How many on this board know who Michael Taylor is at the Food and Drug Administration? Taylor is a former VP lobbyist for Monsanto and now heads up the FDA's food division. His office recently suspended all testing of the foods Americans buy at the grocery store for glyphosate. Can you understand why and who he owes his allegiance? Why is the US EPA in lockstep with his crimes against Americans and all humanity? Upton Sinclair said it is impossible for a man to tell the truth when his job demands that he continue the lie that pays him. I'm not accusing the US EPA of a conspiracy with Taylor and the FDA, because the connection is far too open, flagrant, and notorious. What I charge the US EPA with is collusion, and an ongoing collusion at that. And this defines the crimes of both these agencies and their adherence in violation of federal RICO acts. This aptly applies to your crimes here at the US EPA, as you have become complicit in an ongoing criminal and corrupt organization. Strong words to be sure, but yet befitting of your crimes. It is now upon your heads that you have the opportunity to repent and reform the US EPA as a valid agency and servant to all the American people. I tell you now to be very careful on how you tread upon the American people, because your crimes against all humanity, the American people, will never forgive, nor will we forget. As a footnote to this testimony that I submitted to the US EPA in their official hearings, 1 in 2 adult males in 2050 will be autistic. How can America produce, maintain a GDP? How will America be able to man the defenses? It won't. We'll be helpless. Immigration will walk across borders. and enter America. There will be no resistance, very little. 1 out of every 2 men will be unable to work, unable to defend themselves or America. Think of it. Look around you. Surf's up, America.